الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless every single one of you with your kind words, with your professionalism, with your hospitality. It's the third time I'm in Pakistan, alhamdulillah. And as they say, third time lucky, from the perspective of, it's probably the first time in my life that I'm contemplating moving to Pakistan with my family. So there's something special about this place, something very, very special. And I probably see something that you don't see. And you obviously see many good things, but I probably see something that you don't see in its totality because I'm from the outside. And usually, when you're from the outside, you have more of a blank canvas and you have a different perspective. And I really believe that Pakistan, even though the economic problems exist and many other problems exist, I really believe Pakistan can lead the Ummah. I really believe that. And, you know, if we look at the original mandate of Pakistan, the original mandate, before Pakistan even became Pakistan, the thinkers in the 1920s and 30s, they had this model, this Medinan idea, this idea that just like the Prophet ﷺ will bring different people together to live in harmony with social justice, with economic justice, with transparency, with accountability, with rahmah, mercy, with compassion. That was the model. And essentially that model can be summarized by La ilaha illallah. Right? Isn't that the original mantra of Pakistan? And it is quite moving when you think about the history. For example, the 1947 partition, and as a result you had that mass migration where our forefathers, your forefathers and mothers were raped, killed, massacred. It's one of the most horrifying things that you could read about. So recently I've been reading about the history of Pakistan, the partition, and what happened as a result of migration. And Pakistan is not an ethnicity. You're aware of that. Because many of you are Sindhi or Balochi or Kashmiri or Pakhtun or Punjabi or Greek, right? So it's not necessarily an ethnicity. It's an idea of bringing people together. And you have to realize when the migration happened, you had all of these different peoples from all around the Indian subcontinent traveling to a place because they had hope. And many of them didn't make it. They were killed, raped, tortured, abused. So I think from a historical perspective, we are duty bound to do something for them at least. So we need to make something of this country. I really believe there is something very special. It's the third time I'm here. I have traveled to the private universities, I've engaged with different institutions, different scholars from different parts of the Islamic theological spectrum, and there is something special here. You have the minds, you have the manpower, you have the nukes, you have the intellectual nukes, you have the spiritual power. We just need to make small adjustments maybe on process, management. But I leave that to you. I can't make much of a judgment, so I don't know all of the variables. But from what I've seen, there's something very special. And that means there's a lot on your shoulders. There's a lot on your shoulders. You have a huge responsibility. And the psychology of responsibility is that when you have such a heavy burden, that it either makes you or breaks you. And you need to make that decision. And you need to make it now at university. Because you need to have a vision for your life. Because if you're just going to become a doctor and make some money, get married, then with due respect, you're better than that. Because many of the things that we do as human beings can be reduced to the core instincts, survival and reproduction. So logically speaking, we're no different from an animal. No different from a bacterium. Survival and reproduction, or a cockroach. Fine, you may want to get a great job and have lots of money and you feed your family and get married, but fundamentally that's reduced to an instinct. Survival and reproduction. We need to have something that is elevating our lives, that gives life another meaning or another life to our life. And Allah alludes to this in the Quran when He says, O you who have believed, respond to the call of Allah and His Messenger to that which gives you life. Yuhyikum, that which gives you life. Allah is already talking to people who are alive. But there is another layer to your life. Another window that you can open that would help you reach different heights, spiritual and social and intellectual, by responding to the call of Allah and His Messenger. Now the famous scholar Imam Bukhari, he comments on this verse and he says that this means responding to all that is good. And we need a vision. If you want to elevate yourself from this kind of basic, bestial aspect of living, just survival and reproduction, then we need a vision for our lives. We need to see the world in a particular way. How do you want to see the world? How do you want to see Pakistan? If you don't have that vision, then you're not going to allocate your internal and external resources to a set of actions or a strategy to have optimal success. Because you don't know where you're going. فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? As Allah says, and where are you going? So imagine you have a vision for the world. I see a vision that the world is living by divine values. I see a world, I see a Pakistan that is living by divine values. So that's the see, that's how I see the world. So now I have to be somebody in order to see the world in a particular way. So if I see living by divine values, I see Pakistan living by divine values, I need to live by divine values. That's my be, who I must become in the world. And I must be able to share those divine values with others. So that's the be. And then the do is all of the necessary actions that would help you achieve that. So you have to focus on different aspects of what it means to be the optimal human, following divine values. And that would have the physical element, your health, the intellectual element, your spiritual element. How connected are you to Allah? Do you have a strong spiritual heart? How do you develop a strong spiritual heart? The salah, the dhikr of Allah, the tadabbur of the Quran, the pondering over the Quran, the night prayer, the istighfar, the asking for forgiveness, the tawbah, coming back to Allah. So all these things, the reflection over the verses of the Quran. And then you have social elements in each book, professional elements. And then when you categorize all of these things, and you have certain actions that will link to them, that would link to your be, that would help you achieve your see. So you see the world in a particular way, you see Pakistan in a particular way, you need to be something, someone, you need to become, you have a be, and then you have a do. You have to do a set of actions that will necessarily achieve the see, how you want to see the world. And then from that, you can put it in a nice spreadsheet and have daily, weekly, monthly, lifetime targets connected to those actions. This is a brief summary on trying to establish a vision for your life and a set of actions that will achieve that vision. Like many of you, inshallah, are going to be the future doctors of Pakistan. Many of you may have different motivations, and there's a hierarchy of motivations and drives. Some of you just want to be rich, no problem. Some of you want the status. Some of you want to help others. Some of you want to get the reward that Allah says in the Quran, if you save one human life, it's like you save the whole of humanity. Some of you, it may be all three. All of the three things I've just mentioned. Many others, maybe you're just doing it because you want to get out of Pakistan. Right? I don't know what your motivations are. But don't rely on your motivations. Motivation is overrated. Motivation is just an emotion. I wasn't motivated coming today, I'll be honest with you. I'm motivated now by seeing you guys, for sure. I'm inspired. But I was not motivated in the beginning. In actual fact, I wanted to cancel. Because I'm tired. I've been here for 8 days. I think I've done 1 month's work in 8 days. There's been like 5-6 events a day, hardly any sleep. Now, I'm not saying this to blow my trumpet. I'm saying this to give you an idea about what it means to be someone who just relies on motivation. If you just rely on motivation, sometimes you won't wake up, sometimes you stay in your bed, sometimes you won't study. So you need to rely on your vision that's linked to a sense of duty and discipline. Because discipline will give you that success. And the basis of discipline is sabr, patience. Inna Allah ma'a sabirin. Allah is with the patient. Patience is the basis for all virtue, all success. Because it's the basis for discipline. Without discipline, there is no success. So you need to be disciplined, and what will facilitate discipline is having that vision. And having a duty to your country, duty to the ummah. Because we are suffering. I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. And even in optimism, we have to say there's suffering going on. Especially when it comes to the context of dawah. We have a lot of ideological challenges. We have liberalism. We have nihilism. We have humanism. We have atheism. We have postmodernism. We have many other isms and schisms that are trying to engulf the hearts and minds of the ummah, of the Muslims. To actually destroy what it means to be a Muslim, destroy what it means to be a human, and to destroy the necessary values that served this ummah well and served Pakistan well. And dawah, my dear brothers and sisters, is not just spiritual dawah. Pray, believe in Allah, we'll have akhirah, we'll be paradise, for sure. But we need to elevate our thinking and be strategic like the Prophet ﷺ. But before I say that, when I spoke about a vision, I forgot to mention that your vision has to be Allah-centric and akhirah-centric. For it to have grounding, for it to be long-lasting. What does Allah-centric mean? It has to be pleasing to Allah. Because otherwise, as you know, spiritually, acts of worship are not accepted unless we have ikhlas, the right intention. We're doing it for God's pleasure, for Allah's pleasure, that He's worthy of worship. That we want His divine reward and we don't want divine punishment. And akhirah-centric means you see yourself in Jannah in a particular way. I mean, this dunya is very limited. You see life and death all the time as medics. The akhirah is eternal, this dunya is finite. So see yourself in Jannah. So your vision has to be linked to that. Allah's pleasure and where you want to see yourself in Jannah. So, talking about these ideological challenges, be strategic like the Prophet ﷺ. A great striving in our tradition is to use the intellectual arguments of the Quran. In actual fact, one of the famous scholars, a 14th century scholar, he said there will come a time when we will have to use the intellectual arguments of the Quran, and now is this time. Allah says in Surah Al-Quran, to strive, to struggle, bihi, against them, bihi means here with it, referring to the Quran, jihadan kabira, a great striving. One of the greatest forms of struggle of jihad in the Islamic tradition is the intellectual struggle. And you want the future intellectuals, the future influencers. And there are ideologies and isms that are trying to engulf the hearts and minds of the Ummah and of you, of the people of Pakistan, to fundamentally destroy Pakistan. To destroy what it means to be Pakistani. To destroy La ilaha illallah. To destroy those necessary social and familial bonds that we have. And you may think, oh, this is just an ideas thing. No, it's more than that. It has practical implications. Because ideas, worldviews, ideologies impact people. And they impact whether people live or die. Whether they're healthy or unhealthy. Whether they're spiritually healthy or spiritually unhealthy. They impact social bonds. They even impact things like policy, which impact real lives. They impact how you view economics, which would impact real lives. It could end up saving millions of lives, killing millions of lives, just because of an idea. So take, for example, my beloved brothers and sisters, liberalism, that disputatious set of doctrines. Liberalism really has the view that the primary seat is on the individual. That's why you have ideas like individual rights. Don't get me wrong, we believe in individual rights. Even in the Islamic tradition, we have the idea of huquq al-ibad, the rights of the servants, the rights of the individuals. But we have a particular framing of that, the correct lenses in order to understand rights. But liberalism, generally speaking, focuses on the individual as an abstract entity devoid of social obligations and attachments. Those are the words of Professor Marilyn Friedman. And that's because individualism or atomism is the basis or the philosophical assumption of liberalism. They want to atomize you. They want you to see ethics, rights, duties, behavior, law, all from an individualistic perspective. And let's be honest, Islam is not an individualistic culture or tradition. Pakistani culture is not an individualistic culture or tradition. We don't send our parents to glorified concentration camps. We don't do that. That's not part of what it means to be a Muslim or what it means to be Pakistani. Mom stays with us. Baba stays with us. We take care of them because they took care of us. But in the West, it's a pandemic. It's even almost like a virtue. They get old, they can't take care of themselves. Ma salama, bye-bye. Do you want to take your parents to those type of concentration camps? That's what they are. They call them old people's homes, but they're really concentration camps. And this happens because of what? An idea, a philosophy, a worldview, how you see the self. So if you see the self as atomized, the self as an abstract entity devoid of social obligations and attachments, then reap what you sow. And this is being fed to you now, especially on the elite level, and you need to be aware of this. I was at LUMS a few days ago, the whole University of Management Sciences, which is known for its liberal arts and its interesting arts as well. I don't know if you can see what's been happening recently, but I leave that for you to Google yourself. And I was telling them, don't have an inferiority complex. And with all due respect, we're suffering post-colonial trauma. to be quite colloquial with you now. We have Gora complex. Let's be honest. The white man, the savior, you know? I mean, people think I'm white, but I look thoroughly Pakistani. I'm Greek, but I was born in Britain, but I look more like you than I look like them, that's for sure. So I'm one of you, okay? And I like my rotis and my dal. So, but think about this. Think about this very carefully. Because what's being exported, especially here, because I'm from the West, I've got 3 postgrads in philosophy. I'm not saying that to show off. I'm saying that for you to understand that I'm grounded in this tradition, in the Western tradition. And when they're exporting a particular idea in Pakistan or around the world, it's a particular conception of Western ideology. It's not the full picture. And it's been exported here as a universal truth that if you don't adopt it, you're backward, and if you don't adopt it, you're a bigot. But this is a lie. Have some critical thinking. And let me give you an example. Freedom. Freedom is important. Who wants to be a slave? Individual rights. You're a free individual human being. No one's going to disagree with this on the surface, but let's scratch that surface. That's the whole point of being at university, right? To scratch the intellectual surface. It's not just primate facie on the face of it. Remove the different layers of assumptions to expose what's really going on. Isn't that what we do? Isn't that what we do? Isn't that what the art of being a teacher is? To unveil those assumptions. So when they're feeding you a particular form of freedom, it's actually liberalism in disguise. Now I can talk about this in depth because this was one of my analytical philosophical specialist subjects, the idea of freedom. Obviously I'm not going to unpack it all now, but I want to give you an idea. The idea of freedom generally is the absence of coercion. And when you read Whiteheimer's book on coercion, he really solved the issue concerning what even coercion actually means. And it's not necessarily you being forced to do something. Let me give you a medical context. If someone needs life-saving surgery, and they have to sign a consent form, they are coerced to sign because there is an untenable alternative option, which is their death. Would you say that person is not free? They're free, but they're coerced. They have an untenable alternative option, which is death. So they sign the consent form. So this is one example amongst many to show that just being forced to do something or having an untenable alternative option doesn't mean you're not free. So the long philosophical discussion is this. Coercion is about the violation of your rights. That's what coercion is. And therefore freedom is that you have your rights fulfilled. Therefore, any curtailment of your freedom, any restrictions to your freedom, is your rights being not fulfilled. So freedom is about rights. This is well known in academia, by the way. So here's a question, a philosophical question for you. What conception of rights? And who has the right to give you your rights? And even in the Western discourse, there's the positive view of rights, the negative view of rights. So which form of freedom are you talking about? But they won't give you this discussion. Did you have this footnote when they were giving you this form of liberalism in the elite universities or in Pakistan to individualize you and atomize you so you could change your moral compass, so you could send your parents to glorified concentration camps? Because that's the result of individualism. Just look at the fruits where I'm from. Forget social media and TikTok and all of this bakwas. Yeah? Think about what's really happening in my own country. Can't take care of the old people. Can't take care of the mothers and fathers. moral fragmentation and decay. This is well known. This is not a Mowgli talking. This is their own people. Look at Pew Research, look at the social studies. Social fragmentation and decay as a result of liberalism, which is based on individualism and atomism. So you see this intellectual exercise to get you thinking that, okay, well, what conception of freedom? Who has the right to give you your rights? And what conception of rights? So don't allow them to force this down your throat without any challenge. And learn the Islamic perspective. Because Islam has a solution to these things. Islam is not an individualistic or atomistic religion, meaning it doesn't individualize the person or atomize them and say that you don't have any social obligations and attachments. Islam is a profound complementarian system where individual and societies and groups of individuals, they complement each other. It's like a social, political, moral symbiosis. Which echoes the prophetic tradition of the Prophet ﷺ that the rights, the limits of Allah, the hudud of Allah, the protection of those rights and limits are like people on a boat. There is an upper deck and a lower deck. And the upper deck is giving fresh water to the lower deck. If the upper deck stops giving fresh water, the lower deck will make a hole and the boat will sink. Society will sink. If you become individualistic. Is this clear? Good. Take this seriously because this impacts lives. Now is the time we live in this juncture of history. This crossroads of time where we have to make a decision where we're going. Because if we carry on like this, in 20, 30 years, your children will send you to a concentration camp. The glorified concentration camp. Without a doubt. That's the trend. Study your history. Study world history. But we have something to offer as Muslims. We have profound, timeless values that have served humanity well. So that's liberalism from a particular perspective. Another challenge in the Dawah. Another challenge for our youth is atheism. The most ridiculous idea that has ever entered the hearts and minds of a human. I really believe atheism is the equivalent of believing that the world is flat. We shouldn't even give it much intellectual discourse, to be honest, but we have. It's a nonsense idea, irrational. In actual fact, atheism denies reason itself. Because atheism, the philosophical conception of atheism, which is the metaphysics, if you like, of an atheist, most atheists, not all of them for sure, is philosophical naturalism. Philosophical naturalism, if you don't know, is the worldview, the lenses that someone puts on their eyes in order to understand themselves and understand the world, is the lenses that basically says there is no God, there is no supernatural, there is no non-physical, and everything can be explained by physical processes, which I think is really funny. It's hilarious. You know why it's hilarious? Because that denies our ability to reason. I'm telling you, atheism is utter bakwas. It is the epitome of rubbish. And let me intellectualize this for you. In the scientific method, when we make scientific conclusions, we make something called the inference to the best explanation, or the inductive inference. You heard of this before? Yes? The inductive inference. The inference to the best explanation. The inductive inference is basically what theories do, essentially. A well-confirmed successful scientific theory has a lot of empirical confirmations, and it has predictive power. The conclusion of a particular theory, and theories in the scientific domain of knowledge have a high epistemic value. Theories are basically inferences. They make an inference based on the data. It's probabilistic, yes. It's a high probability, but it's still probabilistic. You make an inductive inference from limited observations. You conclude, you have a valid inference that is a conclusion as a result of reasoning over empirical confirmation. Is this clear? So keep that in mind for one moment. Keep mathematics now in mind. 1 plus 1 is 2. What about logic? Deductive logic. In a deductive argument or conclusion, the conclusion necessarily follows from its previous premises. There is a logical relation between the conclusion and the previous premises. Let me give you an example. Number 1, whatever begins to exist as a cause. Number 2, the universe began to exist. Conclude this for me. Number 3, the universe has a cause. Thank you. Don't worry if you don't believe in those premises. It's irrelevant. We're talking about the logical validity here. The reason you responded by cause because there's something happening in your mind. It's logically valid. It's a deductive argument. The premises guarantee the truth of the conclusion. The conclusion has necessary logical relations with the premises. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because where is this happening? This inductive inference and the logical conclusion, the deductive argument, where is it happening? Is it happening here in the real world? Did you take the premise here and you put it together and then you form the conclusion? Is it out here in the real world? Where is it? Well done, sister. Akal. It's happening in here. Correct? We have rational insights. We take two premises and we take them on an intellectual, mental journey and we form a conclusion. All of this stuff is required before you do science. Science can't prove it. If you study the philosophy of science, there are some assumptions to science and some necessary things that you have to even have before you do science. And for you to say science proves logic, well, you're arguing in a circle because it needs logic in order for science to work in the first place. It's like a dog trying to catch its tail. So, it's a mental issue, which is linked to consciousness, of course. But why am I mentioning this? Because how can you explain your ability to reason, your ability to be a rational human being, your ability to have an inference to the best explanation, your ability to make an inductive inference, your ability to formulate a deductive argument? How can you explain that if you're a philosophical naturalist? That thing can be explained by physical processes. But physical processes are blind and non-conscious, according to philosophical naturalism. There is no intentional force directing them anywhere, and they are blind or non-conscious and not aware of themselves or aware of anything outside of themselves. They're not about anything or of anything. They don't have, in the language of the philosophy of the mind, no intentionality. Blind, cold, non-rational. So how can you have rational insights, the ability to reason from physical processes that are blind and cold? To even claim such a thing is believing in magic, or that something can come from nothing, or that if you have an inanimate object like a stone, that if you rub it really hard, it's going to produce butterflies. This is why I'm saying atheism is bakwas. By the way, they understand this because they have these philosophical discussions. And that is one element of why atheism is irrational. Or at least that form of atheism, which is kind of the popular form. As Richard Dawkins said in his fiction book, The God Delusion, it is a fiction book, come on. The reason it's a fiction book is because he's a biologist, and then he entered the realm of theology and philosophy. You should stay in his lane, stay in your lane, stay in your lane, right? You should get a ticket. He's going in the wrong lane. You don't have the expertise or the grounding to even discuss these nuanced theological and philosophical issues. Why would you even listen to biologists? Like me, I'm a philosopher, so I'm speaking philosophically, political philosophy, and so on and so forth. I'm not telling you about science. I'm going to tell you much about science.
I'm miskeen when it comes to a lot of science. So I would refer to experts on that issue. Anyway, so what he says in his book is that generally atheists are philosophical naturalists, meaning that they don't believe in the supernatural. Things can be reduced to, explained by physical processes as understood by the philosophical naturalists. So theism would make sense of our ability to reason because there's an all-aware being, that's all-wise, all-knowing, that created human beings with the ability to reason.
Or create a physical world with asbab, with physical causes that will come together in a particular way that would allow us to reason. And these physical causes are not necessarily blind and non-conscious because they are being created and directed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, intentional force. So our theism, Islamic theism, solves great metaphysical problems. Like why do we reason? If we just came from our ancestors according to the Darwinian model, then why should we trust our minds? If our minds came from the mind of an ape. If our minds were just about survival and reproduction, then why should we even trust our ability to reason? The one will argue, well, if you can find the truth, if you can acquire truth, you're more likely to survive. That's actually not the case. It's not the case at all. Because using your rational faculties is actually resource intensive. You require more glucose. You require more biological resources. Thinking about complicated intellectual and existential philosophical topics drains necessary resources, and you need those resources to survive. For example, a master chess player will spend 3,000 calories just by playing chess, and most of it is mental. And you don't have time to over-rationalize. Because if you're a jungle person and you hear a rustling in the bush, you're not going to start doing a scientific experiment to find out if that rustling was as a result of the wind, an earthquake, or a predator. You assume predator and you run. And maybe 50% of the cases you go wrong. But that survival mechanism is important, but it's irrational. If I'm a jungle person and I go into a jungle and I'm hungry and I'm starting to eat some berries, but then I decide I want some mushrooms, but I avoid the mushrooms because I believe all mushrooms are poisonous. I end up surviving with that irrational belief. But some mushrooms are good for you. And I can appreciate mushrooms is not a Pakistani cultural dish. But you should try it, it's nice. Maybe have a mushroom dal. But you see what I'm saying here? These thought experiments are there to get you to think. I'm not here to teach you what to believe, I'm here to teach you how to think. And we've unpacked liberalism and the notion of freedom of rights originally for you to understand how to think in that way. And we've unpacked briefly atheism. And there's much more to say, but I don't have a whole day with you. But inshallah, when I come back, I'll spend a few days with you. We'll go for a whole module or something. Take, for example, and I'll do it for free, by the way. Just give me a biryani, that's it. Karachi one. I had Karachi biryani is the best biryani. Is that true? Yes. Wow. But they say that Lahoris have the best food though. No? You know, there's a thing in Lahore they say, if you haven't been to Lahore, you haven't been born.
Yes.
Well, but maybe, sister, it's because when you go, you want to die. I'm going to kidding. So, and we have intellectual arguments in our tradition. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. The Quran addresses atheism in a very profound way in chapter 52, verses 35 to 36. Did you come from nothing? Did you create yourself? Did you create the heavens and the earth? Indeed, you have uncertainty. I've used the structure of the Quranic argument in a universal way as a philosopher to some of the greatest atheist minds in this world, and they haven't had a strong response. I'm not saying this out of arrogance, I'm saying this because the Quranic arguments are the best. They're intuitive, and yet when you unpack them, they're very profound philosophically too. Yes, of course, the Quran, Tarifisi, the ayat, they're there not to read to philosophize initially, they're there to trigger your innate disposition, your fitrah, to awaken the truth within you. That's the power of the Quranic verse. But there is a secondary function
the epistemic function of ayat. There was a secondary function, and that function is to get you to think as well and for you to explore a little bit further. So let's explore these verses to annihilate atheism. It will take 5 minutes. So Allah mentions, did you come from nothing? Did you create yourself? Did you create the heavens and the earth? بَلْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Indeed you have no certainty. So originally this word refers to the human being. But it can refer to anything that came into existence, anything that was created. Because Allah says, أَنْ خُلِقُوا مَخْلُوق. The thing that was created, it once wasn't here. It's finite. It is muhdath. It came into existence. And we can universalize the underlying logic of these verses.
So when something comes into existence, it can be explained in the following way, or with the following questions. Number one, did it come from nothing? Number two, did it create itself? Number three, was it created by something uncreated? Why am I mentioning this? Remember the verse? Did you, the human that is created, did you create the heavens and the earth which are created? So, was it ultimately created by something created? Or four, which is applied, was it created by something uncreated? So let me repeat the options. Something that begins to exist can be explained in the following way. Number one, it came from nothing. Number two, it created itself. Number three, it was created by something else created ultimately. Or number four, it was created by something uncreated. So let's apply this to the universe. But before we do that, we have to establish philosophically that the universe is finite in the beginning. We don't need to talk about the astrophysical evidence. Even the astrophysicists say they don't have definite proof. In Islamic philosophy, this is known as, or Islamic thought is known as ilm al-dhann. The ilm of dhann is speculative, meaning it's probabilistic. It's not qat'i, it's not deductive. So we don't have to refer to it. Even the philosophy of mathematics. Let's talk about first principle metaphysical stuff that we can't deny. If I said to you, this phone is eternal, would you believe me? Why is it not eternal? Put your hand up. Let's have some interaction. I will not hear you from there, my beloved sir. Sorry, ma'am. Sorry, I can't see. Oh my God. I do apologize. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I just realized because there's sisters everywhere, so please forgive me. So I actually literally can't see that far. Yeah? I'm 42. Yeah? Alright? I'm not 32, I'm 42. I look 32, but I'm not like that. So, you have to be a bit louder, please, yeah? Yeah, but I'm claiming it's not created. I'm claiming this thing is eternal. That's the point. So don't think anything about its history or anything about its durability. Think about what you observe directly. From what you observe, how do you know it is not eternal? Yes? It cannot function. It could be dysfunctional, no problem. This thing I have in my hand is eternal. Never began, always exists. Sorry? Don't worry about its history. You're assuming this thing was created because you've seen videos about mobile phone factories. This is a special phone. It's a Pakistani phone. So this is an eternal phone, had no beginning. Yes, sister?
It can be broken.
It can be broken. Don't worry about its durability, I said. Think about this phone in my hand without you even touching it, just observing it. Why is it finite? Yes, sir. Ooh, very close. Very good. So, our beloved Professor? Yes. He said it has specific components that have a specific life. That is 90% correct. It needs to be slight adjustment. It's so intuitive that it's even hard to say, right? So you not being able to articulate it doesn't mean you can't think. It's just some things are so intuitive, like, why would I even even have to think about this? Like you have to brush the dust off certain surfaces of your area of your brain just access this type of thinking. That's how intuitive believing in Allah is. Well, basically the reason this is not eternal because it has specific limited physical qualities. It has a particular size, shape, volume, temperature, color, mass, density. Why is it this size and not another size? Why is it this color and not another color? Why is it this volume and not another volume? Why is it this density and not another density? Why is it this mass and not another mass? It could have been otherwise. And that raises another question. These limited physical qualities, did this phone give rise to its own limited physical qualities?
No.
There must be something external to it, prior to it, that gave rise to it and its limitations. Easy. And there's a price limitation as well, thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Price as well, but I'm going to focus on observables, not on the value. This phone does not give rise to its own limited physical qualities. There must be something prior to it that gave rise to it and its limitations, correct? No science can deny this. These are first principles. Okay, do me a favor. In your mind right now, take this phone and expand it to the size of the universe. Now ask yourself the question, is the universe eternal or finite?
Finite.
Finite. Thank you very much. Yes, there are mathematical models and astrophysical discourse that and eternity, there's temporal spatial boundaries, there's all of this stuff. But this is, as I said, dhanni. It's ilm dhanni. So, given the fact that we have good reason to believe that the universe is not eternal and it came into existence as finite, then we can apply these questions. So let's apply them. Could the universe come from nothing? But before we do that, let's define nothing. We are not defining the theological nothing. This is the philosophical nothing. The theological nothing is kun fayakun. Allah created the first creation without any prior material or physical stuff. Or any prior creation, for sure. But Allah was there. His irada and qudra was there. His will and power were there. So it's not nothing in the philosophical sense. It's nothing in the theological sense. We don't need to address that. So let's define it in a philosophical sense. Nothing means no thing at all. The absence of any prior causal conditions, the absence of any property, the absence of any potential. This is not the Lawrence Krauss nothing, yeah? Which is a ridiculous notion because his nothing is something, by the way. It's a quantum reality. And a quantum reality, according to science, is a physical thing. He only developed this model because he wanted science to address metaphysical questions, which is ridiculous. The science has metaphysical assumptions. And you can't address all questions because it's a limited domain of knowledge. As you know, like science can't pay your taxes. Science can't deal with logical relations, as we just discussed. This is the realm of the philosophy of logic. That's something else. It's a different domain of knowledge. Anyway, so Lawrence Krauss, he felt that, yeah, the universe comes from nothing, but his nothing was really the absence of time and space, which are physical things. But even when you remove that, you still have a quantum reality. So his nothing was something, so it's a non-argument. And also, we can't say that, oh, the quantum vacuum is nothing, because many people may say who don't really know their science, they say, Hamza, you're wrong, something can come from nothing because there are subatomic particles that emerge from the quantum vacuum. But the quantum vacuum is not nothing, it's something. It's a bridge structure, it obeys the laws of the universe, and it's something physical. So anyway, let's go back to our nothing. It's no thing, no prior causal condition, no thing at all, no property. Can anything, even the universe, come from that? No. Because kuchne plus kuchne plus kuchne, you get kuchne. Right? If I have nothing in my pocket, I can't give you anything, right? Say that again? I can't hear you.
Sir, I asked a question. Okay, what about random and non-random?
Random and non-random. Is it relevant to this discourse?
Mahram and non-mahram.
Mahram.
Mahram or non-mahram?
Mahram.
Yeah.
What's this got to do with atheism? No, we'll ask the question by
Yes,
saying.
I asked a question, not just I asked a question.
Yeah, I'll answer this. sister, at the end, because it's not really directly related, because you're going to divert me in a different part. And if that's the case, we're going to talk about female-male interaction. We'll be here until the day of judgment. I don't have that time. So we will address it. That was so random. Alhamdulillah. God bless you. So,
That was so random.
okay. The easiest way, if you want that person to be a mahram, just marry him according to the Sharia. Easy, yeah? And by the way, if they don't go to your father first, then this person, forget about mahram, non-mahram, he's a non-man. Because the real man will go to your father first. That's rujula. That's prophetic masculinity. Yeah? And remember, sisters, I know everyone's on a journey, but remember, sisters, what Islam gives you and wants you to have internally and externally is always the best for you. Because Allah is al-Bar, is the source of all goodness. And people who want to basically, strip you naked, they want to decivilize you, right? And people who want to attack your heart and your mind, with this kind of excessive form of feminism, they actually want bad for you, yeah? Because they're not telling you what's happening in the West. There are Muslim sisters, unfortunately now, in the mid-30s and 40s, unmarried, depressed. Like, what was this for? I wasted my time getting a PhD. I wasted my time. Don't get me wrong, you should do these things if you have to, if you want to. But it's about more priorities and social priorities. There are lonely people now. Especially these white women, right? Who are like, all about career, no family, this is about me. And when they turn 40, they're depressed, they regret it. The author of Sex and the City, do not watch that bakwas, yeah? But the author of that filthy program, the writer, she regrets. She's like, I need family, we're social animals. Islam came to preserve these important moral hierarchies. Islam is not misogynistic. Islam does not have hatred for women, it doesn't have injustice for women. But that word is a loaded term because people use misogyny from a kind of liberal, postmodern discourse with their own assumptions. And Islam is not patriarchal from an unjust perspective that you have a man who's got one who wants to basically just do what I say. It doesn't work that way. It's complementary. Yes, we are patriarchal from the point of view that the father or the elder brother is responsible for the well-being of all people under their wing. It's a complementarian system that has served humanity well. And it's not serving the West well at all. We already talked about some of the statistics and the social fragmentation and decay that's happening. You're sold a different version. You're sold the Hollywood, TikTok, Instagram version of what's happening in my country. In 2004, there was a report called the Children's Society Report. And it cited individualism, which is the basis of liberalism, as the sole cause of social fragmentation and decay. So we could talk about these things later, yeah? But anyway, let's go back to the atheist issue. So, the universe couldn't come from nothing as we've defined. Even think of it mathematically, 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. And by the way, be logically consistent. If you could believe something could come from nothing in this sense, it means that you could close your eyes, count to 3, and when you open your eyes, this whole auditorium disappears. And the disappearance of this auditorium would require no explanation if you're consistent. It could be the equivalent of me pretending to be Richard Dawkins' bank manager and saying, Richard Dawkins, all of those millions that you've made from your fiction books, the money's just disappeared. He should be, oh, thank you, bye-bye. To be consistent. Because if something could come from nothing in this sense, then something could disappear without any prior causal condition either. So something can't come from nothing. The universe can't come from nothing. Second, who remembers the second question? Did it create itself? Did the universe create itself? Easy, logical example. Did you give birth to yourself? Can your mother give birth to herself? Because self-creation implies it has power before it exists. Self-creation implies that it was once in existence before it was in existence. What was the third option? Well, maybe, ultimately, the universe was created by something else created. Maybe this universe, consider this hand as the whole universe, was
But then we could ask, how did that universe come into existence? Is it eternal? No. Okay. So another universe created that universe to create this universe. Same question applies. There was another universe. Okay. Then how did that come into existence? Oh, there was another prior universe. If we continue that questioning, that goes on forever, we would never have the universe today. This is called the absurdity of the infinite regress of causes. Something that our medieval scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah and Al-Ghazali spoke about. Because if, say I am the universe, and for me to come into existence, right? Hello, right? Say I'm the universe. So I'm drinking the mic down. For me to come into existence, I have to wait for forever, a forever chain of causes, prior causes, in order for me to exist. Would I ever come into existence? No, because forever never ends. If I have to wait for a forever chain of causes. But since I do exist, it means the chain of causes is not eternal. Which means there must have been an uncreated cause, an uncaused cause, an uncreated creator. You see how easy that is just from the Quran. It's from the Quran. Someone doesn't have to believe in the Quran to even realize the logic that we have. So the challenge of liberalism, we've unpacked the fact that it's not universal and that it has its assumptions. And we have the challenge of atheism, which is easy addressed, and we just briefly spoke about our ability to reason can't be explained by philosophical naturalism, and the universe itself obviously has an uncreated creator. And there's much more to discuss, but what I invite you to do, you can download my book, The Divine Reality, God, Islam, and the Mirage of Atheism, online for free from the Sapiens Institute website, or you can access the forthcoming Urdu version, which is already being, actually what I'll do, I'll even send you the PDF maybe. I have the PDF of the Urdu version. I'll send it to the professor, but you can share it amongst the students. There's specific chapters that deal with these things in detail, and they give you references and they respond to academic and popular contentions. So we'll end on this because I think it's been a while. We'll have some Q&A. Maybe we'll talk about the Mahram and the Mahram issue. So why did I speak the way I spoke? I spoke the way I spoke for a particular reason. To show you that we have intellectual challenges, to show you that you need to have a vision for the Ummah, vision for the world, and vision for Pakistan. Remember, we spoke about vision in the beginning. And to show you that you need to be someone in the world to achieve that vision. And you need to have a specific strategy that's linked to daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and lifetime targets to achieve that. And I spoke a little bit about the Pakistani history for you to be motivated, that we have a duty to the people who migrated and sacrificed their lives to be here. And we have a duty to Allah, because our vision has to be Allah-centric and Akhirah-centric. And we have to remember the mandate of Pakistan, which was La ilaha illallah. And then we spoke about some of the challenges. And the intellectual challenges like liberalism. And we explained the philosophical assumption of atomism, individualism, and we explained that what's being exported here is actually not universal. It's not actually not an established truth. I unpacked that from a Western philosophical perspective on the idea of freedom as an example, and even the idea of individualism. And that conceptions of freedom are predicated on conceptions of rights. But who has the right to give you your rights, and what conception of rights? The positive, the negative, the religious? So they can't export this as a universal truth that you have to adopt. And we see the fruits of this so-called universal truth. It has destroyed societies. Then we spoke about philosophical naturalism and atheism, and the Islamic response to that. And I did it in a way, we talked about, deductive arguments, the inference, scientific inferences, and how that happens in your mind, that can only be explained by a theistic universe. But the reason I mention these things in this way is to plant a seed in your heart and mind so it can motivate you. Remember, I'm not here to teach you what to believe, I'm here to teach you, help you to think, or facilitate that. Because we could take each aspect of what I've said and spend a day on it. But I've done this in a particular way to touch, move, and inspire you. Because as I said in the beginning, Pakistan does have the ability to lead the Ummah in the world. It has everything it needs. Just slight tweaks and adjustments. So, I'll end on this. Allah says in the Quran, in chapter 16, verse 1 to 5,
Call to the way of your Lord with hikmah and beautiful preaching, and debate with them in the ways that are best. This is a very beautiful verse. Allah is telling us to call to the way of Him, of Allah, of our Lord. With hikmah. Hikmah here is wisdom, and wisdom is applied ilm, applied knowledge. So when you apply your knowledge, you have to know the context. So that means you need to know the context, you need to know the objective, you need to know how the knowledge, and apply it. Then you have to do it with hasana, with goodness. And goodness implies ihsan, excellence, ikhlas, sincerity, rahmah, mercy, mawadda, love. But then Allah says, and debate with them ways that are best. The ways that are best, the three main scholars of Islam, not main, but the three classical scholars, Al-Nasafi, Ibn Kathir, Jabakhshari, they comment on this and say, debating ways that are best are debating in ways that there is no gruffness, there is no harshness, there's kindness. Just like Musa alayhi salam was told to Allah to speak to Pharaoh, one of the worst creatures, layyinan, softly. And Imam al-Qurtubi, the classical scholar, basically said that if Moses had to speak nicely to Pharaoh, imagine how we should interact with other people. Because you're not Moses, and the person you're speaking to is not Pharaoh. And the verses the sister recited in the beginning of Surah Fussilat, chapter 41. And I want to focus on verse 34 that the sister recited at the end. And we'll end on this, and this should define your character. It's the prophetic character, having hilm. You have to have hilm before you have ilm. As the mother of Imam Malik, the famous scholar of jurisprudence, classical scholar, said, you have to have humanity, ethics, adab, akhlaq before you have ilm. Otherwise, ilm won't make sense to you. You can't plant a seed on a rock. Your heart has to be spiritually soft. So Allah says in the Quran, good and evil are not the same. Repelled by that which is better. And between two people there was any enmity or hatred, it would turn to intimate friendship. And this is difficult except for the patient. Allah uses the word repel here, and it's not followed by a direct object in the Arabic language. It's like repel anything by that which is better. And the scholars say repelling anything by that which is better is repelling by things which are more virtuous and more beautiful. So brothers and sisters, be people of virtue and be people of beauty. May Allah bless every single one of you. Thank you very much for having me and giving me your time. Assalamu alaikum. So let's have some, do you have time for Q&A? How long?
In case anyone has any questions, please rise up on your seat and the mic will come to you. Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, so first of all, it is an honor to see you because I've only ever seen you in videos, and like to see you in real life, it felt amazing. My question is that there is a verse in the Holy Quran that says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. That Allah Ta'ala does not burden a soul more than it can bear. Right? So, and in the introduction you said that you're an optimistic person, right? So, in times of distress, like in times of pain, in times of injustice, like especially right now, currently, when there is like Syrian, Turkey, earthquake, there's a lot of injustice, pain, suffering. How can a Muslim, how can I personally, not feel overwhelmed by this? And like, what are some practical, implications? What advice would you give me, to like, so that I can see hope? And because currently all I see is destruction. I don't see this ummah going anywhere, and that bothers me a lot.
Yes.
So how do you stay optimistic?
Because you have a big heart. That's why. That's a good sign. It was true. And you have to understand that, that's something very special about Pakistanis in general, right? You're very passionate people. Very passionate. You're like the Asian versions of Greeks. Yeah? Like Greeks are like that. Like my dad would speak to my son when he was growing up. Like he would bang the kitchen table, the dinner table, and be like, I love you, Zakaria. Yeah, like really passionate. Zakaria, I think, started crying. Yeah. So that's how we express Allah. Like we get the chicken, we'll bite it, yeah? And she might cry, and don't worry guys, I love you. Yeah? We have this kind of, it's like, have you heard of cute rage? Cute rage is a thing, yeah? You know, something is so cute, you just want to throw them down the stairs. Yeah, obviously you won't do that, but it's like an overwhelming type of passion. Keep it, trust me. That is such a huge gift from Allah, but you have to tailor it in the right way. So let me give you some advice on how to tailor it. The first thing to understand is you need to have an akhirah-centric mindset when it comes to these issues. The despair comes when you focus just on the dunya. I'm not saying ignore the dunya. That's silly talk. And even that distinction between deen and dunya is a ridiculous distinction. I don't want you to ask that question anymore. I hear brothers and sisters ask, brother, how do we manage between deen and dunya? It's a wrong question because the deen came for everything. It came for the dunya. And Allah says, if you're going to become a millionaire, become a millionaire. Some Sahaba were millionaires. This is how you do trade, this is how you do justice, this is how you do politics, this is how you do marriage. Pay for that. What's the deen dunya distinction is a secular distinction, it's a Christian distinction. Render unto Caesar's what is Caesar's.
Read the word. So they face difficulty in practicing Islam, and because as you know, they learn about different religions. So my question to you that what inspired you the most, like which is the most very prominent thing which inspires you to become a Muslim? My second question to you is that there is a huge conflict and there is a huge argument on between science and the deen, that how life has started. So if you can comment on it.
Yeah, I mean the first question I already answered, those three main points of why I became Muslim. The second question concerning the conflict between science and religion, and this is basically the kind of topic of my PhD. So, specifically when it comes to the origin of life, I really feel that this is a non-issue. Like, honestly.
If you study the philosophy of science, it's a non-issue. Even if there is total contradiction between the two, it's still a non-issue. Let me explain why. In the philosophy of science, there is something called the epistemic status of theories, of scientific theories. The epistemic status of scientific theories, you have three main approaches: realism, anti-realism, and instrumentalism. Realism is, in a successful theory, which means it has a lot of empirical confirmation, it has predictive power, that the predictions that the theory makes, or the theory being applied to what hasn't yet been observed, that theory, if it's well confirmed and has predictive power, is a representation of the actual state of affairs. So let me repeat. Realism would state that a successful theory, which has empirical confirmations and it has predictive power, that theory can be applied to what has not yet been observed concerning that observed phenomenon. Say it's Darwinism. Darwinism is considered a successful theory, it has empirical confirmations, and it has predictive power. Darwinism explains biological change, evolution. Biological change, we haven't observed all of biological change, it's impossible. Species have died, and we haven't explored the descent of the ocean, and whatever. But because it's a successful theory of predictive power, it can be applied to all biological phenomena. Readers would say that application is that this theory is a representation of truth, of the actual state of affairs. Anti-realists would say, no, successful theories of predictive power with confirmations are only a representation of the observations you've had at hand. The non-observed, the theory just becomes a workable model. It's not a truth in that way. It's not a representation of the actual state of affairs. Anti-realism says it's not truth at all, right? Essentially, in a basic crude way. They all agree, even the realists, that even they believe that well-confirmed theories that with predictive power are a representation of the actual state of affairs, they can still change. So that's the epistemic status of theories. If someone believes in the Quran from Allah, the epistemic status of the Quran is that it came from the one who knows reality. And if there happens to be a friction, if you cannot reconcile within the rules of usul tafsir, the principles of tafsir, linguistics, and so on and so forth, there's no reconciliation, and there's no problem. Because why would you take something that has less epistemic value over something that has a higher epistemic value? Epistemic meaning acknowledge, truth. Now, does that now mean you reject the science? No. You accept the science, but you don't have to put everything in your aqidah, because you know science can change, even well-confirmed theories. Richard Dawkins mentions this in the Devil's Chaplain. He basically says that Darwinism may totally change, we may reject it in a few years' time, based on new evidence. So accept it practically, you use it to discover antibiotics, save the world. Alhamdulillah. You don't have to now put it into your core beliefs, because you know the philosophy of science. Theories can change. Even when you study the inductive inference, which is the basis of scientific theories, or induction, which is the thinking process whereby you move from the known to the unknown, from the observed to the unobserved. I observe 1,000 white goats, therefore all goats are white. Or therefore the next observed instance of a goat is going to be white. That's an inference. We know it's wrong, so now we get the point. That's an inference. That is probabilistic, it can change. Even when you study confirmation theory, the philosophy of science, and even if you apply Bayesian probability, there's lots of difference of opinion among scientists and the philosophy of science. So, Darwinism has come from that. So don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. Don't take it into your creed. If you think it contradicts the Quran, you don't have to take it into your creed. That's a simple way of doing it. Because most theories are probabilistic, based on philosophical assumptions, and they have their own disputes. PAD, P-A-D, probabilistic, has assumptions and has disputes. It can change, it may get better, it may stay the same, who knows? But given the fact that you know this, if there's any possible friction, even if there's friction, it should not undermine your value system or your belief. Given the fact that you believe the Quran to be from Allah, of course. And also, when you go into the details as well, it's not as problematic as you think. Because many of us, what we do, we approach the Quran with metaphysical and epistemological biases, which is problematic. We think every verse has to be empirical. No. Verses also have the first person experience perspective, it's got phenomenological perspective. It may relate to ethics. And the problem is we don't study the Quran properly to understand what it's trying to tell us. That's why we think we're going to enforce an empirical paradigm on the Quranic discourse. I'll give you a quick example just to highlight this. When Dhul Qarnayn, he goes and he sees the sun setting in a muddy spring, right? You have these ridiculous scientists, empiricists, atheists, secularists, liberals, people who just don't know nothing about the nuances of our tradition. Oh, you guys believe the sun sets in a muddy spring. It's like, do you know anything about language? Even the classical scholars who didn't have the problem of today's scientific enterprise in terms of that maybe it creates a friction with religion. They even said this was phenomenological experience. It was what it appeared to him as. Simple. Like poetic language. Even the idea of the sun setting, that's a non-scientific language. Are you going to deny the way we say, oh, it's sunset now? The sun doesn't really set, you know that, right? It's our first person experience. So these fools are inconsistent. Right? And that's what happens a lot with the Quranic discourse. I give you another one. Honestly, people are fools. They have hatred. It's pseudo-intellectuals. Remember what I said earlier, the Gora complex. Don't have the Gora complex. So listen to me. Allah says in the Quran that there is an emitting fluid that comes from the sulb and tara'ib. Right? And in the English translation, backbone of the ribs. Some people say, Quran is wrong. You silly folk, you medieval people, uneducated, backward people, be like me, the liberal, the secularist, be like me. the philosophical naturalists, be like me, the Gora complex. Yeah, that's what they want. I know this sounds really funny, but trust me, this happens all the time to us. That's why I'm mentioning it. I'm not doing this just to be like dramatic. It happens. If you find this problematic to you, then, well, I'm sorry, this is the reality. I'm here to talk to you about reality. Yeah? If you want someone to talk to you about non-reality, then invite an atheist to speak to you. So, the point is this, my brother. So take this. They say the sperm doesn't come from between the backbone and the ribs. You guys are wrong. Quran is wrong. Now, prima facie, if you don't know much about Quran, or you're not connected to the richness of the Islamic intellectual tradition, you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? I may have to just, ignore the Quran and have blind faith. No. Just go to the tafsir, go to the language, go to the principles. First and foremost, Allah doesn't mention the word sperm. He doesn't mention nutfa, which could be correlated to that which is like a single drop from a greater quantity of fluid. Allah mentions man. Fluid. That's the first point. The second point, sulb and tara'ib have multi-layers of meaning. That's the beautiful kind of eloquent expression of the Quran. You don't have to force yourself on one meaning. Especially when the Prophet ﷺ didn't give us a specific meaning, so you're open to the richness of the language. Sulb can mean backbone, but it's also a kinaya, which is like a linguistic indicator for a man. Tara'ib can also be a kinaya for a woman. It's like a polite, eloquent way of saying that when the male and female, obviously in the context of marriage, when they have intercourse, there is a fluid that's related between them. Correct? Very simple. First person phenomenological stuff. But this is the beauty of the Quran, it's multi-layered. There is another meaning. Sulb can mean the backbone. Tara'ib can mean the pelvic arch, the area. And it's true that most of the fluid that comes from the man comes from the testes, which is in the pelvic area, the arch area, comes from the seminal vesicles, comes from the prostrate, and it actually goes up, right? It goes up the seminal vesicles. You doctors, you know this better than me. Why am I teaching you how to suck eggs? Yeah, that's what they say in Britain. You're teaching an old woman how to suck eggs. It means you know this, yeah? So that's also true. That's also true. So that other meaning is also true. It's because they fixate on a particular linguistic interpretation that, the author at the time who translated the Quran had to choose one word. But that's not how the Quran works. And what's beautiful about the Quran is giving you multi-layers of meaning that all correlate with a naked eye understanding and even a deeper understanding. You just have to learn the deep. But will there be time to assign to that friction with religion? Maybe. So what? And I already talked to you about inductive inference, probabilistic reasoning, the epistemic status of theories. You don't have to reject them. You still do the science, but understand that my aqidah, my creed is from Allah and so on and so forth. This time is truth. It's a human project. If you study the philosophy of science, the philosophers of science say this. For example, I think it's Kitcher, I forgot their names now, Gillian and Kitcher or something. They say scientific facts are not engraved in stone. And don't conflate observational facts with scientific theories. Those are two different things. Yes, but I observed it directly. The moon is round. Yes, I know, but that's not scientific theory. You need more than one observation, and you reason all those observations to infer a conclusion. Or to infer a pattern. Yes, so direct observation and theories are not exactly the same. You need direct observations or indirect observations, many of them, in order to start theorizing from a scientific perspective. But having one direct observation is not a scientific theory, it's just an observed fact. And the Quran doesn't go against observed facts. It may go against the theory here and there, no problem, but you have the tools now to be able to deal with that. Alright? It was a long answer, but I thought it was important, so to empower you.
Thank you so much, sir.
The time is done.
We are eternally grateful to you for gracing
Where
this
is the
event.
sister, by the way? It's like oh, wow! Give her a round of applause for being very articulate and very polite and very, almost like politician here. Yeah? Maybe she would help us leave Pakistan in some way. Yeah? No more corruption. Corruption is everywhere, by the way. Yeah? Even in my country. Corruption is just easier to see here because you have big hearts. Corruption is harder to see over there because they don't have big hearts. And corruption is hidden by the lobby groups. Yeah? You know, in COVID, they had a huge PPE scandal. The politician gave all the massive £50 million contract to his friend, who never even engaged in PPE before. This goes against any kind of law of procurement. Yeah, so don't worry about it. We're all the same, man. It's a human project, yeah? That's why we have to focus on the spiritual heart. Allah says, you're not going to be safe on the day of judgment unless you come to Allah with qalbin salim, with a sound heart. Anyway, thank you, Sister Karen.
Thank you so much, sir. We're eternally grateful to you for gracing this event with your presence and bestowing us with your knowledge. Now, I will call Sir, if you care to come down. Actually, we would like to have the honor to call him back again for receiving the Shield of Honor. But first, I would like to call the DG, Vice Admiral, retired Athar Mukhtar, Hilal Imtiaz Military, for the closing remarks. Vice Admiral retired Athar Mukhtar, Hilal Imtiaz Military, joined Bahria University Health Sciences Campus Karachi on January 2023 as Director General. He got commissioned in Operations Branch of Pakistan Navy in 1984. During his illustrious career, Vice Admiral Athar Mukhtar, Hilal Imtiaz Military, served on various commands and staff appointments that include Commander 9th Squadron, Director General Pakistan Maritime Security Agency, Commander Karachi, Deputy Chief of Naval Staff Training and Evaluation, Deputy Chief of Staff Personnel. He did his Master of Science in Defense and Strategic Studies from National Defense University. He served as Pakistan's ambassador to Maldives for 3 years from 2020 to 2022. Please give him a big round of applause.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. It really gives me a immense pleasure to have an internationally renowned speaker at our campus and very enlightening talk on Dawah and the youth. Thank you, Sheikh Hamza, Andreas, Tzortzis, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. And there's a lot of work being done in your organization and the life Deen also into Dawah. Inshallah, it will bring some fruits. I'm also impressed to know that such a young age, Hamza has attained many achievements. Although he reverted to Islam in 2002, he has been authored to a book called The Divine Reality, God, Islam and the Mirage of Atheism. He has been part of many inter-religious international sort of a dialogue between scholars. Although really people don't hear at all such an eminent scholar, but I think there are some very encouraging messages. One, that it is very heartening to know that all the basic ingredients to lead the Ummah is already there in Pakistan. It is a matter of the adjustment and leadership, I would say. Alhamdulillah, our structure is very strong. Our structure is very strong and it just needs to be put into the right direction. And I think second big takeaway from the Shaykh is that we need to set visions for our life. And when I set a vision for my life, or you set vision for your life, then your actions, your conduct should all be channelized toward that vision. as we say that see not what country is doing for yourself, see what you can do for the country. So this is the time that we should set our missions, and those missions then will take it to the next heights, and your every action should speak of that mission. And another very able lesson I got from your speech is, I used to advocate to the youngsters that the philosophy of life is between sabr and shukr. These two words, my personal about 60 years age experience is that about 80-90% is life, sabr and shukr. But Sheikh, today you have added another word to this, is compassionate. So it is sabr, shukr and compassionate. Then it completes the philosophy. So, alhamdulillah. And the last is, I think we need to be ready for test. When Allah gave you so much, even then you are tested. When Allah doesn't give you, even then you are tested. So between these two, when Allah gives you, you are being tested with sabr and shukr. And again, when it is not with you, you are being tested. So you have to, in both cases, rise and pass this test. We need to be ready all the time. At the end, I would like to thank the Sheikh Hamza and the live team who have made us this possible and connected with him. Thanks a lot, and we would be really looking forward to see you again in this campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for the concluding remarks. I would request you to stay a little longer on the stage for the distribution of the sheet. Now, I call upon our honorable guest, Mr. Hamza Andreas Tzortzis, for the receiving of Shield of Honor. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, on account of Student Support Center for joining us in this session. Please remain seated while I request the respected faculty to gather together for group photographs. Along with our honorable guest, Mr. Hamza Andreas Tzortzis. All principals, vice principals, director, HODs, faculty, deputy director, managers, please gather together for group photograph.